Hello and welcome to the morning program, The Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with all the happenings on the paper. And we would love you to be part of the conversation, so you can drop your comment on Facebook and in YouTube, and then we would love to hear what you have to say about that. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham, and I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansey. Good morning.
Morning, Sally.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great, thank you so much. And without much waste of time, we'd love to go into the papers, starting with the Punch newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, on minimum wage, private sector states forward labor's push for 1 million naira. You can find details on page 2. And for Punch 50th anniversary, punchers begin training for novelty match. Federal government plans sanctions for non-performing discourses on the power outages we have been having. You can find details on page 22. Federal government US begin talks as official test copters wreckage. NTSB relocates chopper's engine, rotor blades, landing gears today. Nigeria to support US team. Abiodun Dangote orders visit Wikwe Ogubaje's family. Late Access Bank CEO Kingsmen protest. You can find details on page 21. IMF forecasts $8 billion fall in Nigeria's 2024 foreign reserves. Kidnappers killed our driver for talking. This is coming from Ekiti school worker. NAFDAC insists on sachet alcohol ban. Hoodlums attack officials. This is really sad. You can find details inside the paper. And then we have picture stories where we can see stakeholders, where we can see Aliko Dangote paying tributes to the family of late Wikwe. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Emifele approved $6,230,000 payment for international election observers. This is a weakness, telling the court. Access Holding appoint Bolaji Agbedi as the acting CEO of the bank. You can find detail on page 3. And also here we're seeing the NGX market cap record gains of 100.6 billion naira. Labour threatening to shut down port over 50% deduction from revenue. You can find more detail of that on page 11. The big story for the paper is on the high cost of living. PDP governors deride Tinubu's policies. And also we are having a picture story down here where we can see the governor of Lagos State with all the stakeholders at downside of the paper. So you can grab the paper in more detail of any other story that is of interest to you this morning.
On this day newspaper, the big story, South Africa's President Ramaphosa mourns Wikwe, says he was his country's continental partner. The writer saying Diri Aboriwori, Peter side Chike Obi, CIB and others paid tributes to deceased. Wikwe University pledged to run with founder's vision. Access Holdings named Ms. Bolaji Agbedi acting CEO. You can find details on page 25. And at the top of the paper, fresh crisis hits Labour Party. Treasurer accuses national chairman of fraud. Says Abure forged late predecessor's signature. Audited account to INEC. Party reacts, says accuser under external influence. You can start with the details on the front page. Nigeria, UK to sign enhanced trade investment partnership agreement today, where we saw that the Minister of Trade visiting Nigeria on a 3-day work visit yesterday. You can find more details on page 26. Electricity Act, partner government on renewable energy, Apabio tax investors. Current hardship caused by economic security challenges, PDP governors declare. Khan optimistic of better days. Kano Emir expresses worry over situation. Senate asks governors to share grains to citizens. You can find details on page 25. We have a picture story where we can see Dapo Abiodun consoling late Herbert Wikwe's parents. And at the downside of the paper, we have alleged $6 billion fraud. Ogunloye asks court to decline jurisdiction. Details can be found on page 27, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at what the Blueprint newspaper have still on the issue of the former CBN governor. $6.2 million was paid to foreign election observers, says weakness. And then we have Stay Away from Adama Warehouse Featery 1 hoodlums. You can find detail of that. Remember that happened last year where we saw that hoodlums actually barged into a warehouse in Adama, and that food was supposed to be given to the vulnerable people, and especially people who have been affected by the flood. And here we're seeing the governor is giving a strict warning to people to stay away from the warehouse for people who are planning on actually, going there. And on business, we have $4.5 billion in foreign reserve unaccounted for during the COVID years. This is an audit report. You can find detail inside the paper. And still on sports, we're seeing that we're still hanging on to that. Tinubu hailed the Super Eagles despite AFCON lost. And you can read more detail of what he said to them inside the paper. Also here we're seeing that Niger retailers and residents Tobago enforce move against Kanu, Lagos, Ibadan traders to avert food crisis. Price shoot up by 200%. Market authorities blame banditry and fuel subsidy removal. And then Emir Bayaru says people that are hungry, Kanu traders crash prices. You can find more detail of that on page 6. Why we are not opposed to subsidy removal. This is coming from PDP governors. And we have a writer following that story that say partner federal government to avoid distraction, call for state police. Seen on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper, police arrest over 307 hoodlums in Abuja. Detail found inside the paper. Coming from the Labour President Ajero, he's saying workers' minimum wage demand may rise to 1 million naira if. So you want to know what the if is all about, you can read more detail of that on page 6. Terrorists kill 9 traders in Castina, 3 in Kaduna, and kidnapped 32. More detail found on page 6 and 7. And on the issue concerning the weak-wing coalition alleges complicity, urges thorough investigation concerning the crash. You can find more detail of that inside the paper, and that's all on the Blueprint newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, how CBN released $6.2 million to pay election observers, bank director narrates in court. Enough of killings, declares state of emergency on security. NUT tells Tinubu, says insecurity forced many teachers off the schools. The big story on the paper, cost of living. Nigeria almost becoming Venezuela, PDP governors want Tinubu to initiate hardship ending measures, insists on state police to end insecurity. Nigeria collaborates with U.S. to investigate helicopter crash. You can find details on page 5. Like 6 billion naira Mambila power fraud, Ogunloye queries AFCC's power to prosecute him. Kidnapping worsening at Ondo, Edo, and Kogi borders. Ondo Amotekun commander says. You can find details on page 26. Emir of Kano to Tinubu's wife, tell president Nigerians are hungry. Want him to speak on CBN FAAN relocation to Lagos. You can find details on page 3, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Vanguard newspaper, energy crisis, Nigerians' electricity generation drops to 17.8% to 4,015 megawatts. You can find more detail of that on inside the paper. Kidnappers from Ekiti, Edo, Kogi invading Ondo State. This is coming from the Amoteku. So you can find detail of that inside the paper. And on Edo Guba election, ESCO members won't participate in Labour Party indirect primary. This is coming from the chairman. With the APC elect 960 delegates for February 17 direct primary. You can find detailing on page 13. Why federal government should consider 1 million naira as the minimum wage. It is coming from the NLC, and I wonder if they will consider that. Sometimes, Rachel, we keep saying we have to be realistic with what is on ground, and if the government can actually afford that. But this is what the NLC is saying concerning the minimum wage. Of course, with the hardship, in fact, 1 million naira will not even be enough to actually cover for some of the expenses that Nigerians have. But I just want us to be practical. Are we sure that 1 million naira, the federal government will approve that? How much, because according to the government, how much is a member sitting? How much do they get paid? How much are senators paid? You know, that is where we have all of this comparison coming from, and then not to talk about civil servants and all of that. So I do not see this being realistic anyway, but that is what Ajero is saying, and we hope to see what the federal government will say concerning that.
So like, this is literally the problem with labor. I see this as a buzz request. Like, they want to make the headlines. They just want to have some relevance for a long period of time, because this is very, very unrealistic, over unrealistic. And anything above 200,000 for minimum wage in Nigeria is very unrealistic. It doesn't say, it doesn't dispute the fact that we deserve even more than that, or a Nigerian should be earning way more than that. No. But we are looking at what is achievable between a short period of time, some amount of relief for a common and average Nigerian. Now, let's not forget that it is called minimum wage, not maximum wage. It is minimum. That is
the
lowest, a starting off point. Exactly. So why are you saying 1 million should be the minimum wage? Do you just want to make headlines? Do you just want to keep having endless meetings with the governor, maybe getting your brown envelopes because you will keep, well, we can go down to 700, federal government is saying no, we will adjourn this meeting for the next 1 month, and then you come back and you say, well, we want 500, and then the federal government say, it's not important. 3 months later, NLC, TUC are sitting still with the government negotiating minimum wage, because this looks like this is what Labour is trying to get out of it. While we are looking at, why are you not giving a minimum wage that within a short period of time, the first quarter of 2024 is almost over, we are looking at starting the second quarter, which is April, and this is when we want to see this minimum wage being applied. And Joe, you're calling 1 million naira, and then I wonder, what is the rationale behind you saying 1 million naira to be the minimum wage? You started with 200,000. They did not listen to you, and instead of you to bring it at a level where what, by April, let people start seeing some kind of minimum wage.
Cause a delay eventually.
Even if our minimum wage will be a bag of rice, what, 77,000. It's okay, seller, in a sense that somebody can buy a bag of rice
and you can share.
Yes, exactly. Since it's one of the major things. Okay, what is that thing that is being consumed the most? It's maize. Federal government make the minimum wage this amount. We know that average families don't keep going and buying 1 measure of maize. My point is, be reasonable, so that within the shortest period of time, the committee that have been set up will come to a conclusion, and before April, it will be implemented, and workers will start seeing this wage reward. I mean, this minimum wage, as wage reward is elapsing, then they are starting to see a minimum wage, and then we move, and then we grow, and then as time goes on, after a while, you can start making more demands from. But let's start seeing one thing or another, and this is what this is where NLC, permit me to say, are falling in the hands of Nigerians, because we are not supposed to see this kind of thing coming from them. We are expecting more intelligent analysis. Sit down with your group, analyze and say what minimum wage we will bring out to the federal government that we know they can't pay, and then we stand by it and they adhere to it. When you bring a minimum wage of 70,000 and you say, what, we have gone through this, and we know that the federal government of Nigeria can make 70,000 the minimum wage, we are not shifting our grounds, and you stand there and you just let them do the rest, but you make your stand. But at 1 million, what stands is that? Wow. So I'm just looking better from NLC, not just them trying to make headlines, and just play with the masses in Nigeria.
Well, I think Nigerians have a better answer for Labour, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed, just like to really analyze this whole thing, because with this projection coming from Labour, I can only see that there's going to be an extension of when the minimum wage, it won't be April again, because you made mention, imagine one meeting after another, before we realize we're in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
So I hope that will not be the case. Still on Vanguard newspaper, Buhari's reckless policy triggered the current hardship coming from Sanusi and Oshomole, and then we also have a write-up following under the paper. And also we're saying crisis hit Labour Party, treasurer asks the chairman to access okay, I take that story again. Crisis hit Labour Party, treasurer asks chairman to access to actually account for the 3.5 billion naira. You can find detail of that inside the paper. And on the African Creators Summit, we plan to promote creative economy. You can find detail of that coming from the convener of that summit. Emir of Kano to the First Lady, tell your husband Nigerians are suffering. You can find more detail of that inside the paper. And still on the economy, we're still seeing that comment from the PDP governors, what they have to say about that. We have other column for sport, and also still on the issue of week when helicopter crash, where we've seen a number of people that are trooping to actually have a condolence visit over there. We can see a picture story also backing up all of those stories, and that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, 113.8 million undocumented Nigerians raised doubts on population size. And then we have a breakdown. As of 2012, we had 167 million Nigerians. And then between 10 years, we are seeing a 30% growth down to 2022. We are at 216.78 million. And then UN projection for 2050 is 400 million. And this says that it's very important for us to have our census. And then we are seeing that the NIN registration still 32% short of World Bank's 148 million June target. Insecurity defies NIN SIM leakage as kidnapping fosters. And then we have dependence to active population ratio. We're having 64 to 36 dependent to active population ratio. That is really high. 64 to 34. We have more than half of double those who are independent and those who are dependent on those who are independent ratio. I mean, it's really high. It's very high, Sele. And then population under 14 years is 91 million. I just hope that we have morning registration, we have the census going on, because if we had a 30% growth between 10 years, stopping at 2022, and these are all projections, it's not for sure, because we haven't had census since 2006 in Nigeria, and then
over 16 years
exactly
right now.
So it's very important that we have this, and so that we just stop imagining what our population is and really know how many we are in this country as it is now.
Very true.
Still on the Guardian newspaper, CBN informs court of $6.2 million release for 2023 poll. Father of slain Anambra lawyer slums and dies. This is still on abduction. You can find details on page 12. Reps flags ministry inability to defend 75 billion naira COVID-19 expenditures. Alleged $6 billion fraud. You've no power to try me, ex-minister Ogunloye tells EFCC. NSIB collaborates with U.S. agency to probe cash. And we have import duty FX rate raised 4th time in February, now 1,444 naira 0.56 naira to $1. You can find details on page 21. NLC pegs wage against naira depreciation amid calls for urgent action against hardship and hunger. 10 years after verdict, women folks still await property and inheritance rights in Southeast. I mean, why is it taking that long? You can find details on page 4, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, gunmen kill cop, 3 inmates in Imo prison, farm settlement attack with the rider. 4 attacked, 3 injured in a fresh Plateau attack. You can find more detail of that story on page 4. The Sun Award Honorable Credible. This is coming from Owimere. You can find detail of that on page 6. PDP governors tackled the federal government over the high cost of living, with the rider lament the falling naira and worsening insecurity. Kanu Emir to Tinubu's wife tell president hunger, insecurity alarming. You can find detail of that. I don't think that Remi Tinubu needs to tell the president he is aware of what is happening in the country. But I think this is just a message trying to send across to the president the situation on ground. And then we're having alleged procurement fraud. EFCC opens case against Emifere. You can find detail of that on page 5. How foreign airlines discriminate against Nigerian pilots and engineers, with the rider. Minister NCAA DG Sean inquiry over the FOI. You can find that on page 14 and 15. Nurses protest new guidelines for certificate verification. You can find that for any nurse that is interested in that. You can read more detail of that on page 26. Nigerians lose over 500 billion naira to Ponzi scheme as SEC clamps down on illicit investment platform. You can find detail of that on page 22. And then here we have phase out electricity subsidy. IMF tells the federal government, we've been seeing that from yesterday on our papers down to when they started giving that suggestion to the federal government of Nigeria. So you can find more detail of that on page 25, and that's all on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, equities market gains 100.65 billion naira on first trading day. The big story on the paper states to National Assembly, we want our own police now. You can find details on page 5. Labour mulls 1 million naira minimum wage. You can start with the details on the front page. Insecurity, inadequate infrastructure stalling Nigeria's mining sector growth. Statement from Kalu. No plans to tax online content creators. A statement from FIRS. Nigeria, US to investigate death of Access Bank CEO. Emefiele's $6.2 million resumes today. You can find details on page 4. We have a picture story where we can see a cross-section of the National Association of Nigeria Nurses and Midwives Abuja chapter on a peaceful protest against the new verification guidelines. This took place yesterday, and that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, e-payment 51% surge in money supply boosts transaction to 76.32 trillion naira. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper. You gave good account of yourselves, Abbas Hill Eagles after AFCON loss. You can find detail of that on page 7. Current poor power supply beyond us, EEDC cries out. You can find more detail inside the paper. And on Edo Guba, battle for party structure rocks the Labour Party. More detail found on page 8, 9, and 10. The big story that is making the headlines on all the paper is still on the economic hardship where Nigerians on the road to Venezuela, PDP governors are actually telling the president to do something about that. Says they are working with the APC-led federal government to bring down the cost of living. Tell your husband about hunger, starvation in Nigeria, and others coming from Emia Bayaru tells First Lady. Nigerian teetering on brink of unrest coming from Obi. Buhari's reckless policy responsible for hardship. This is coming from Oshomode. You can find detail of that on page 2 and 3. And on insecurity, kidnappers fleeing Ekiti to Ondo coming from Amoteku. Detail found inside the paper. African Airlines to airlift 98 million passengers in 2024, a report coming from the AFRAA. And then also we're seeing on national security, IGP orders clamp down on fake news peddlers. We are monitoring online platforms coming from the Nigerian police force, detail found on page 2. And from Imo State, inmates escape as gunmen attack prison settlement senator's home. Kill policeman, abduct prison officers, and then police declare manhunt. You can find detail of that. And remember, Rachel, where we saw that till date, we're still having some inmates that escaped that we're yet to get account. And it will surprise you actually to know that Imo State has been leading in this prison break. I get to ask the question, what really is happening when it comes to prison break? Are we saying that some of the prisons are so porous that inmates can come in and break out whenever they feel like? What steps have the governor of that state put in place to work together with the correctional service to make sure that, you know what, if this is how these inmates were able to escape and cause chaos, what can we do to make sure that everything is being done together? And last year also, I think we saw a report that said that possibly they might be working with some of the workers there, and maybe that is why they are able to make it out. So regardless of what it is, whenever I say prison break in one state, I get afraid because it has a ripple effect. Before I realize it, another part of the country will actually experience it. So I hope that the government will do something regarding inmates breaking out of prison. Remember when they talked about the hashtag NSAS, saying it was linked to a prison break and all of that. So I just hope something better will be done so that Nigerians can actually be safe. Where we are handling the issue of insecurity, we're having another form of insecurity again when inmates break out and all of that. So more proactive measures to be put in place so that these inmates will actually be in a way that they don't have to break out of the prison.
Exactly, Sele. I think the problem there is the structure with our prison service, in the sense that how are you grouping these criminals? Because there should be a prison that is maximum security because of the type of inmates that are in it. So when you see a situation where there's just so much easy prison break, then it means it's not maximum security. And then you, for example, you're keeping hardened criminals in a normal security prison, because there is category and grades of criminals, whether we like it or not. And there are certain places you are supposed to keep certain. If you keep armed robbers in a less in a not very secured prison, for example, they will break each other out because that's their lifestyle. So for it to be that easy and it keeps occurring, then it means our prisons are not having maximum security, and then you are leaving hardened criminals where they can easily break out. Because it's not supposed to be, it's everything, Stella. When you look at Nigeria, it's like everything, there's just a spree of crime at every level. Kidnapping, terrorism, banditry, you just name all the crime, and then prison and then we have prison break also just happening, and then we have our security agencies not being able to bring back those that are out there, and we just have criminals at large, at the run, and even probably living a free and normal life, even freer than some Nigerians that are not even criminals, and all of that. So it's really sad. I just hope that our prison restructure, we see a lot of gaps and the laxity. We see congestion, we see how the dogs are being fed better than inmates, and then now we are seeing that obviously the structure is giving room for prisoners to be able to keep breaking each other out, and then it's not supposed to be so. This just keeps adding to the crime in the country, because anybody that won't serve his jail time will go out to do more crime. People who stay and serve their jail time oftentimes come out as better people, because it's a correctional center for a reason, is to correct that person. But when people break out, they're going back to their crime life, and then it means we just have more criminals at large. So I just hope that, you know what, let's have these criminals back where they are, and perhaps let every prison be maximum security in this country, so that it won't look like our prisons is just a holiday ground for prisoners, and anytime they want to go out, they will go out with ease. Yes.
It's really sad, Rachel. Actually, you rightly mentioned, I mean, the structure. That's why we have categories of some of this prison. We have the minimum facility and we have the maximum. That is to say that for hardened criminal, that's why we have them in Kirikiri and the rest of it. You stay there where the fence are so large, well kept, so that we're sure that you don't break out. But we saw that of Abuja. They actually drilled the ground to actually break out. So you ask questions such as, where did they get all the equipment that was needed for all of that? So we need to be extra careful on that. Downside, we have a study that said spikes in air pollution linked to suicide risks. And I think I am interested in that study, so I think everybody should be interested as well. You can read that study on page 26, and that's all on New Telegraph newspaper. But before we move further with other review, we have quite a number of stories on the paper. We're seeing condolence visits still coming in for the former Access Bank CEO. We're also saying, I mean, the nurses have taken it to actually protest the new guidelines for verification guidelines, and then a number of things also on the paper where we're seeing prison break again is coming up on our paper. So we would love to hear your own views. Remember, you can drop it on Facebook and on YouTube, whichever handle is accessible to you. When we come back, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories that are making it on the front page of the paper. We've seen that of the condolence visit for Week Wayne. We're also seeing our nurses taking it to the street. And then we're also seeing the Emir of Kano sending a message to the president through his wife that there is starvation and hunger in the land. Therefore, the president needs to do something. In the same way, we're also seeing PDP governors talking about the hardship. And then with the Edo Guba election that is coming up, there tends to be a little crisis in Labour Party regarding accountability of the funds there between the chairman and also the treasurer of the party. So we would love to hear your own views. Remember, you can drop it on Facebook and on YouTube. I still have Rachel Teze with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sally.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Metrics newspaper, I think.
On the Metrics newspaper, Bolaji Abede replaces Harvard as acting CEO Access Holding. AFCON 2023, stop bullying, Alex Iwobi Rega tells critics. You can find details on page 16. Oshemele blames Buhari's policy for Nigeria's current woes, says Nigeria is still grappling with long-term consequences of those policies. The big story, rising insecurity, economic hardship, PDP governors weigh in. Reiterate call for state police with appropriate safeguards to avoid any abuse. Cost of living is going high. We are almost on the road to Venezuela. Federal government economic team should find appropriate solutions to the challenge. You can find details on page 2. $6 billion Mambila project, Ogunle's preliminary objection not heard by court. Anxiety as fresh attack rocks Plateau villages and 4 killed. Buhari approved $6.2 million for election observers, says CBN director. FIRS not going after Teoma, Mr. Macaroni, other skid makers and influencers over tax payment. You can find details on page 15. Teachers Union urges Tinubu to declare state of emergency on security. Court jails Mama Boko Haram, 2 orders for 10 years over 40 million naira fraud. You can find details on the front page of the paper. And then we have a picture story, mother of the nation in Kano. We have a picture story where we can see the Kano state governor and Her Excellency Senator Remi Bola Ahmed Tinubu, First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who was in Kano to commission the new facility of law building at the Mariam Abacha American University of Nigeria, named after her. And that's all the news on the Metrics newspaper.
On First News newspaper, how Emefiele paid $6.2 million to foreign election observers. PDP's governors lament the rising cost of living. You can find detail inside the paper. The big story for the First News newspaper, Nigerians' foreign reserve decreases to $24 billion record low. This is coming from the IMF as Auditor General queries CBN over missing $4.5 billion. Also here we are seeing on the Week Win, Nigerian joint investigation of U.S. helicopter crash as Dangote, Abiodun and others pay condolence visit to his parents. Nigerians suffering from Buhari's policy don't blame Tinubu. This is coming from Oshomare. And on the 40 million fraud, Mama Boko Haram, 2 others jailed 10 years. And we have suffering under Tinubu's government alarming, Kano Emir tells the First Lady. Labour consider 1 million naira as new minimum wage. Police hunt IPOP ESN attackers in Imo, and then UI Unilag make top 10 best universities in Africa. FCT police arrest 307 suspected criminals, and then a fresh crisis hit Labour Party as Treasurer asks Abure to account for the 3.5 billion naira. And we have the pictures to where we can see the Ogun State Governor Priest Dapo Abiodun consoling Pastor Shige Wigwin, the father of the late CEO Access Bank Holding, during a visit to the family in Abuja. And that's all on First News newspaper.
On Daily Independent, Nigeria on the road to Venezuela, statement from PDP governors concerning hardship in the country, bemoan economic security challenges facing the nation. Emir of Kano to First Lady tell Tinubu Nigerians are hungry. The big story, only restructuring will fix Nigeria, Ohanaeze Pandev MBF. Decry high cost of living and insecurity. And on Wigwe helicopter crash, Nigeria collaborates with U.S. for full investigation. Port Harcourt refinery receives 475,000 barrels of crude oil. You can find details on page 2. And on sexual harassment trial, 2 phone seized from Professor Idi phone admitted as evidence. Access holding shares plummeted by 6.26% after Wigwe's death. Despite headwinds, insurance sectors CAGR averages 25% growth in 5 years. At the downside of the paper, Huriwa asked National Assembly to stop wasting money on constitution amendments. And that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
No, Rachel, we've been talking about restructuring. I can't remember the first time I saw restructuring, but it's becoming like a song right now in Nigeria that for anything to work, they need to be restructuring. And you can't help but ask, when we say restructuring, what do we mean precisely? Are we talking about breaking and starting it all over? Are we talking about reorganizing things because they are not the way they should be? Because, I mean, I've heard even the former president, Obasanjo, saying the same thing about the fact that we need to restructure Nigeria for things to work out. And I just couldn't help but ask, I mean, when we say restructuring, what are we really saying? I mean, this is talking about, we can go back to talking about the 1999 Constitution, going down to bringing the government to the people at the grassroots level. And you can actually tell that from the way things are happening, government is not at the grassroots level. Government is at the top. So the people at the grassroots are mostly not being considered when it comes to carrying them along with policies, with implementation of things, and then even if it's will benefit them eventually. We've seen that that is not. And no wonder we're seeing a concern is here coming from Pandev, Middle Belt Forum, and even Ohanaeze talking about the only way Nigeria can work is when we actually carry everybody along. And no wonder, I mean, yesterday we saw where Syrup was suing the National Assembly on the huge amount of money they are needing. And sometimes you just can't help but to ask, I mean, that money, what do they want to do with it? We saw 6 billion naira for car parks.
Yeah.
Rachel, now we saw that each of them, that's one for the Senate President, the other for the Speaker, 3 billion naira each. And you ask, what kind of car parks are we making? Or are we actually, is it a renovation of those car parks that were there before? So there is a need for the government to say, you know what, here we're saying that, or Shomane is saying we shouldn't even blame the president. But I mean, Rachel, who are Nigerians to blame at this point in time? Because it's a continuation. We're not talking about a different party taking over from this. It's the same party. So as far as Nigerians are concerned, this government is not new to what is happening. You took over from your predecessor. So it was the same party. So as far as Nigerians are concerned, it's a continuation of the same party, the same policy, the same ideology. So what is different here? So each time we see restructuring, it makes it look like a big word, as if we're talking about something that Nigerians cannot comprehend. But I believe it's actually coming down to Nigerians at their level. You always make emphasis of the fact that it's high time we leave politics aside and run governance, because that is what will keep Nigeria going. And I keep saying, as a Nigerian, you cannot say that, I mean, the politics of Nigeria is not my problem. It is your problem, because they will make policies that you want to. What is the business of the farmer in the village about all of this and that? But whether you like it or not, they don't use the dollar, but it's affecting them. Because how do they transport their goods from the villages down to the city when you need to buy? I made mention of the fact that during the weekend I was in the market and I was surprised. I mean, if in Jaws you can get a basket of tomatoes at 13,000 and over, how much would a basket of tomatoes cost outside Plateau State? So we really need to look into a lot of things when it comes to, you know what, bringing governance down to the grassroots level, carrying them along, making sure that setting social policies, certain things that should get down to them should get down to them. And I hope that our government will actually see things from this point of view, so that Nigerians will actually know that, you know what, our government is interested in taking hardship away from us eventually.
A simple analogy of what restructuring is, I believe, is creating new structures while breaking down old structures. You can use that for a house. If you want to expand a building, you don't break down the old building before building the new expansion. You start creating the new expansion around the whole building. Then once you're done with the new expansion, then you can bring down the old expansion that is in the middle of the new expansion before you connect the whole building together. And this is where the government of Nigeria is failing. Restructuring is creating new structure before breaking down the old structure, and we are refusing to create the new structure. Why? Because the old structure is favoring our corruption. We can talk about that when it comes to our constitution and look at how it was fine-tuned, played with, and just, you know, made a good salad with it during the election. Then it tells you that it's not about is not about leaving this old structure, but you start creating a new structure, new constitutions, new policies, new everything entirely, while holding on to the old one. And then when you're done with the new one, you say goodbye to the old one. But do we have leaders that will sit down and do that? We can talk about that for every other policy in the country. Are we willing to tell ourselves the truth concerning trade? Are we willing to tell ourselves the truth and bring out very real policies concerning our exchange rate? So that we have governors, presidents, leaders, former heads of state, present heads of state, whatever, politicians, left, right, center, that are benefiting and are making millions and millions of profit out of the devaluation of the currency in Nigeria.
Because somebody benefits from
somebody is out there benefiting, and that is why they are sitting down, and you are clearly seeing this is what needs to be done. You know it, that even if you run round cycles, as long as you didn't do this one thing, the currency is going to keep falling. But we refuse to do it and prefer to keep beating around the bush, and we tell ourselves that we want to grow. That is what restructuring is. Are we willing to let go of the old structure while we begin building new structures, that we will be able to say goodbye to the old structures? But we are not doing that. Why? Because the old structure is corrupt and we are benefiting from it. And we can state that when it comes to our government parastatals, we can talk about that, because you know what? Now, are we ready to abolish racketeering? It's like the new word I want to be using now is abolish. Are we ready to do away with job racketeering? But do you know why? We have politicians that will not do away with it. Do you know what? Because one of their constituency promise is that we will give you a job. And who started it? Who started it? They are the one buying slots, keeping it, giving millions to these parastatals, be it senators, be it House reps members and all of that, because they have promised their constituency job. So they will buy it from these government parastatals and say, you know what, I am sending 100 million to you, and give me slot for 10 people, give me slot for 50, whatever it is. It starts at the top. It starts with our leaders. These are all the structures that we are looking at. Look at our power projects in the country. For all these years, are we trying to say that we haven't put in money? We are seeing $6 billion for the Mambila power project. What about us talking about our service provider? What was the contract, Sele, that our leaders signed when you decided to go into privatization? When it comes to communication, what was the deal you signed that we are being exploited and nothing can be done about it or be said about it? What was the contract you signed on behalf of Nigeria that we are just being exploited by MTN, we're exploited by every multinational coming to us as a service provider or communication? What was it? And these are all the things, these are all the loopholes that when you sit down and you look at it and say, this doesn't make sense. We know what needs to be done. Why is nobody doing anything about it? Because we have been sold out. The people that have sold us out are still looking at us, smiling, still claiming that they were the best, and yet wearing. And then we are not ready to really restructure this country because we are seeing that, you know what, this is what needs to be done, but they don't want to do what needs to be done. They just, let's just keep beating, let's float the currency, and you know that the floating is definitely not going to give value to the naira, and you know exactly what the naira needs for its value, and you're not doing anything about it. So we'll just keep talking. They make the word restructuring look so big just to make it look like they are working, whereas it's actually that small, and it's something that can be done.
Richard, you said quite a lot, and I hope that our government will get that. I mean, you mentioned a lot, and I always stand on that ground, the fact that there is nothing wrong with any of our constitutions or our laws. I mean, our laws are supposed to be king. That is to say, even the king is under the law, because we keep saying the fact that, I mean, when you come to talking about the law, nobody is above the law. Nobody. Well, you made mention the fact that maybe see where certain people get away with certain things. I mean, what we give the effrontery to the former power minister to say the EFCC cannot interrogate him about certain things. Now, since certain people are feeling they are above the law, we have nothing to hide. You answer the EFCC, you actually go without anything, but you know you have something to hide, then definitely you will now be putting in a defense mechanism so that people don't come for you. But let's just leave it at that, and we hope that the right thing will be done eventually to get Nigeria working again. Well, let's quickly look at another paper, which is the Nation newspaper. And on the Nation newspaper, if you're there with me on the front page of the Nation newspaper, we have the big story: governors, NSA join forces to battle insecurity and food crisis. Panel raised on police reform. PDP governors, OK State Police. You can find detail inside the paper. Also, we see we paid $6.2 million on MFLS directive, says the CBN director. 10 years after $1 billion naira deposit, NEMA yet to get aircraft. Fleeing kidnappers in Ekiti moved to Ondo Amotek, who claims, and I hope the security operative will do something about when we have all of these terrorists moving from one place to another, because it gets hot on one side and then they are moving. I mean, right now there's a climate change, so that can also affect them moving from one place to another. So we hope that they come into the forest, the bushes, and get out of these people before they move to another state to cause chaos. Labour Party treasurer seeks probe of misuse party, 3.5 billion naira cash, detail found on page 4. No plan to tax online content creators, says the FRS. You can find that on page 7. 4 killed in Plateau, that can be found on page 6. Also, we see Nigeria's oil production up by 177,000 barrels per day in January. More detail found inside the paper. And we have a cross-section of, I mean, the condolence visit, a blow of fate. We are seeing where some of our stakeholders that went there to actually pay their condolence visit, and the picture is there. Downside of the paper: challenge is over soon, First Lady assures Nigerians. Equity reopen with 101 billion naira gain, detail found on page 8. And that's all on the Nation newspaper. And I think, Rachel, let's just take the sport just to round up the program, the Punch Sports.
All right. On Punch Sport Extra, we have Blue triumph over late rally, where we can see Chelsea having a 3-1 win over Crystal Palace, and then Salah to return against Brentford. Saka sends title warning to rivals, and we have Los Blancos battle Red Bulls in UEFA Champions League last 16, that is the knockout stage. Wabali begs fans after final loss. Ivorian Trophy Parade, we have a picture story showing that, and the big story is saying stop the abuse. Musa Ekong Gomeru Bakowobi after cyberbullying following AFCON final defeat. Nigerians decry AFCON final ticket hoarding. AFCON win best moment of my career. This is coming from Adinga. You can find details on page 2. At the downside of the paper, Farah leads Kipton tribute, and we have the Tigress forced to reckon with Ogoke boost, and you can find details on page 6. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for doing
welcome,
this with me. And also thank you to our viewers and supporters for keeping a date with us on the dailies until we come tomorrow again. To have a blessed day ahead.